Good morning, everyone. Jim Clark here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary in Central Virginia to share a contemplative focus with you today. And the focus I wanted to share with you is some fundamental questions that meditation masters throughout the ages have asked themselves. The kind of questions that seem ridiculous from an egocentric point of view, the illusory point of view, but they yield some very, very important answers to those who pursue them and meditate and live a holistic lifestyle. So the questions that I like to present right now is, who am I and why am I here? Those are the proverbial time-honored questions that all the great wisdom traditions have explored in their practice, in their pursuit of the ultimate reality of me, you, all, and everything. And let's consider that the most truthful answer to that question can seem very funny to somebody who is still identified with their ego, somebody who's identified with their human experience. So, in the fragmented states of consciousness, stories are considered very important. The story of me, who I am, my job, where I've been, my history, etc., is what most people will respond to if you ask them, who are you? And they'll give you their job or title or something like that. But this is the illusion of the human experience. The truth of the human experience, experienced holistically, is very different. In the state of unified consciousness, it is recognized that everything is the same one consciousness. So the answers, the truthful answers to these questions, who am I and why am I here, are going to be quite different than the history of the illusory experience of being a human being. So the answers, so I'll give you an example. Some answers to this would be, I am who I am. If someone asks you who you are, say, I am who I am. You know, or like say, and what is that? It is as it is. In other words, we are all the same one consciousness. And when you are living with the awareness of holistic truth, that we are all the same one consciousness, there's only one answer. And if you don't know that answer, there's no way that anyone could ever tell you, because you haven't gone through the efforts and the dedication that was required to get to that answer, the truthful answer of it. And so in the years and years of meditating, as you develop more balance and your holistic awareness continues to expand, you develop a sense of presence that is beyond the mind. And as that develops and it grows stronger and stronger, the mind recedes more and more from the status, let's say, that you would have for the mind when you're totally immersed in an egocentric experience. All the noise and stories that the mind comes up with are just that. They're just noise. They're just stories. And there's a perspective from the ego where that's true or not, but ultimately it is all just stories, all made up and all transitory. So when you meditate and you live a holistic lifestyle and you develop balance and your own power, your holistic power that exists within you begins to grow, and the negative polarity begins to equalize with the positive polarity. Instead of being a dominant polarity, it becomes equal to it. Then your sense of presence begins to unfold, and as your positive polarity exceeds the power of the negative polarity with continued practice, then even more awareness unfolds, and this is where the answers to the question of who am I begins to significantly change. Huh? You know that you're the same consciousness as all and everything. And in that awareness, the answer, who am I? I am who I am, makes perfect sense, because that's the answer for everybody. I am who I am, so what? There's no significance to the stories, there's only a significance to the awareness of one source consciousness that we all are. That's the ultimate question of who am I? And the question of why am I here? You're here so you can experience the fact that you are consciousness. This is the primary intention within consciousness, and why the human experience unfolded in the first place. That consciousness outside of a polarized field of experience cannot experience, and it wanted to experience itself fully. And so to do that, it creates this field of polarities, and within that field, by virtue of just entering into it, by default, the negative contractive polarity, the one that is the most limited in awareness, is the dominant polarity. And once you begin the human journey, you begin to explore and immerse yourselves in the illusion of who you are, life after life after life. And at some point, that negative polarity reaches a extreme in your experience. And when it does that, it automatically shifts back towards the positive. And it is at this point that the truthful answer to who I am unfolds in whatever way is appropriate for you to have. In other words, you get a breakthrough, you get some awareness, you become aware of that there is so much more to you than you ever thought. And then your journey to complete unified consciousness begins. And so as a human being, you go through various changes and whatnot that unfold in your cellular history as you constantly evolve yourself back to the awareness of being one source consciousness. And this takes many lifetimes, as it did take many lifetimes for you to become totally convinced that you were just a human being living on earth, not knowing where you came from or why you're here, and yet not bothering to ask because you were so taken in by all the happenings in your world. Huh? You were given a name, you're born in a family, you go to a school, you go through all these different experiences, and you keep growing your stories about who you are. Huh? I was born here, I was born there, I had this family, I had that job, I learned how to be this, blah, blah, blah. And it just goes on and on and on. And if you look at all the stories that you can find today on the internet, especially with talk shows and things like that, where people are totally involved with their history. And that's it. For them, that is very, very important, because their limited awareness keeps them in that narrow, defined experience of reality. Not all. I'm sure there are some very enlightened people who are still involved with those kind of conversations because that's appropriate for them in their life. But for most of us, the stories are okay. I mean, you don't want to walk down the street and start telling everybody you're one source consciousness. They'll probably lock you up and put you away. But that truth, once it becomes living in you, when you are living with that awareness from moment to moment to moment, where your presence as source consciousness overwhelms the stories, it overwhelms your experience of what you once thought was out there is really in here. And you realize that how powerful your experience is because you're creating that experience. You are able to create the experience of something or someone out there, external and separate from yourself. And yet, That's not true. It's not real. Ultimately, it's not real. And once your power develops to the point where that is your moment to moment experience, then that experience of separation gradually dissolves and you are one with everyone. I know my teacher was that way. There was nothing that my teacher didn't know about me because there was no separation whatsoever. And that was the demonstration, or that was part of the demonstration of his, what we call validity, and his basic truth was that he demonstrated that he had that awareness, and he lived with it every moment of his life. He could see your stories and where you were within that evolutionary process in terms of being limited by your stories and where you needed to go. And of course, in the environment of such a person, you're always going to find meditation and holistic lifestyle is demanded, because if you're not interested in that, he or she is not going to be interested in spending their time with you, because you're not going to do the practice and do the lifestyle to get to that awareness. And so their purpose cannot be fulfilled with people who are not interested in what they want, what they can do. So why bother? And this is pretty much the way it is in all wisdom traditions. So I mean, I know when people believe something, if they're religious, let's say, where they're basing everything they believe on faith, they have chosen, or unconsciously or otherwise, to believe in a certain story about this or that. And they want consensus. They need consensus. And the reason they need consensus is because there's no substantiation of their belief. They're not experiencing that belief. So they want to demand consensus in it so they feel comfortable with their belief. And it's just a fear-based response to having a belief that you have never been able to validate or invalidate for yourself. And most people go through life without even considering this, because the vast majority of human beings on the planet at any one time are in their involutionary process, wherein they're still gaining experience in illusion to bring it to that peak where it will shift and they can wake up to who they really are and to the holistic awareness of one source consciousness, that what everything is, the plants, the animals, the planets, the universe, all human beings, and so forth and so on, are that same consciousness going through the same experience, because consciousness, which is the word I'm using for what we cannot know, because we're in a field of experience, a relative field of polarities, that whatever that is what everything is, because it was created out of consciousness, powered and fueled by that desire to experience itself. And in your living your life, you're fulfilling that primary intention. It may not seem like it, and other experiences, or even your own, may not make any sense in this context, and yet it's exactly what you need to keep yourself evolving back to the awareness, the truthful awareness of who you are and what life is. So, who am I and why am I here? The one answer, the simple answer, is consciousness. That's it. That's what's happening. That's all that's happening, even though there's a great illusory show going on with billions of perspectives, human perspectives, all different, all unique, and all valid in this world today, as they always have been from the beginning of time. So, that's what I wanted to share with you today. You and I and all and everyone are the same source consciousness. We're doing what we are here to do because we are fulfilling the primary intention that exists within everything, and that's that. Okay? So until next week, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been of some significance for you in a helpful way. I will be back again next Monday with another contemplative focus to share with you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next Monday morning.